There are a lot of people out there who have genuine concerns about the environment, who are not, you know, those crazy fringe left-type people. But it's a difficult issue for both sides of politics. We saw some of that today with Bill Shorten. We know all too well about the troubles he had on this issue leading up to the last federal election. Many say that this issue in particular on the Adani coal mine possibly cost him and Labor victory at the May election. And if we have a look at the front page of the Australian newspaper, this story with Bill Shorten talking about that issue, Shorten mea culpa on coal message. We might actually have a quick grab of Bill Shorten making those comments today, and let's just take a bit of a listen now to what Bill Shorten had to say.
I do recognise, though, that in making the case for action on climate change, some Australians and people in Queensland in coal, for example, felt that that was at the expense and jeopardising their jobs. Labor will always be a party who supports full employment and blue-collar jobs. And what happened, though, is in the election, for some people it became either you're for climate change or you're for those jobs. And Labor did get the messaging wrong in that we allowed that binary conflict to dominate over the need to take real action on climate change.
It's really interesting, I think, Caleb. We saw in the UK election just last week the working class basically turn away from Labor. We saw it in parts of the country here. We saw it in 2016 in the US presidential election. I'm just interested in your thoughts on the back of what Bill Shorten had to say there. I mean, is it possible for a party today to still be the party of the working class but to not sort of be all guns blazing and all in support of a fossil fuel like coal?
Look, I'm not sure that you can separate the two. That's the issue for the Labor Party. I mean, I've talked about it many times. The problem for the ALP is that they know that they're losing ground when it comes to the Green left, to the Greens, and they are sort of traditionally the higher paid people who live in the city or the inner city. So they're losing ground on that vote because they now have a left-wing alternative that suits their ideals more. And what they've done about that is chase that vote. And in doing so, they've alienated the working class, socially conservative but economically socialist union group that basically is the bedrock of the Labor Party. The problem for the ALP is they need to decide which market they want to deal with. I think what we've seen in the last month or so from Joel Fitzgibbon, from Anthony Albanese, and now Bill Shorten, who I'm sad to say is eminently more sensible now he's in opposition again, not as a leader than he was when he was trying to win an election. I think what they've realised is that if the Labor Party is going to survive in this country, they have to stand up for the workers. And in Queensland, they basically said, we do not want to create jobs in regional towns where you have high unemployment and people are wondering whether their children are going to have a future. That was the mistake they made. They're realising that. They can look to the UK, as you mentioned, and see that the Labor Party has lost ground when it comes to working class voters because they looked at Corbyn and went, he was an unreconstructed socialist. He was talking about spending money left, right and centre, higher taxes. That's not what you need to stimulate the economy. It's not what you need to deal with the bread and butter issues, which is a future for your kids, being able to turn the lights on, having a decent quality of life. They're all things that a government should be on top of. Labor lost sight of that. I think they're now having a reckoning. They've realised that if they want to win their people back, they have to go into bat for the workers. And in this case, they're talking about fossil fuels. I don't think you can separate them.
Yeah, I think it's at least Labor in this country seems to be learning that lesson. And I would add to that list that you rattled off there of the Labor politicians who are really making some interesting comments and shifting. I thought the speech that Claire O'Neill made a couple of months ago on this was probably the best thing that I'd heard from a Labor politician in a long, long time. So they do seem to be at least heeding that message that is coming out of the May election.